I think my miscarriage was a gift from the universe. That feels quite difficult to say and could be very triggering. This video is about my personal experience with my miscarriage, and if this subject is too emotive for you, too triggering for you, you don't want to hear what I've got to say, it's really easy, just close the video. It's taken me a long time to find meaning in my miscarriage. It didn't happen straight away. So just for background, I had IVF. This is going back 9 years ago. I had IVF, we had a perfect embryo, everything was going well. It was, you know, it went back inside me, everything was fine, and then just nothing, just nothing happened. It was the most bizarre experience. I felt something in me, but just nothing happened, and went to the doctor, and yeah, it just hadn't taken. So nothing, literally nothing came out, nothing happened. And after that failed IVF, someone said to me, "You've just had a miscarriage, you must be devastated, you need to take care of yourself right now." And that was quite shocking to me, because I didn't actually feel like I'd had a miscarriage, I just felt like I'd had a failed IVF. And this is part of, I've shared a video about how grief is such a uniquely personal experience. I'll put a link to it up here. And I think miscarriage is a similar thing, because miscarriage is essentially centered in grief. It's such a personal experience. The way I experienced my two miscarriages, or my miscarriage, would be completely different from everyone else, from anyone else. And I think especially with something like miscarriage, it is so uniquely personal, depending on so many different circumstances, that you cannot possibly begin to put your own experiences and expectations on someone else's experience of miscarriage. That person saying to me after a failed IVF, "You've just had a miscarriage, you must be devastated," was really shocking to me, because that wasn't my experience, that wasn't my perception of what had just happened. So that's just an interesting thing to mention before we get into my story, because it is grief and it is uniquely personal, and everyone experiences it differently, and it might have been the most devastating, earth-shaking thing in the world for you, but for someone else it might not be, and that's okay. We are all entitled to experience grief and our lives in the way that we choose to, and in the way that we do. So I just wanted to bring up that IVF story just to really refer to the fact that it's such a personal experience, because I feel like my experience with my actual miscarriage is what I think. I've only actually had one main miscarriage. My experience with it is very unique, I think, very different, and it's not going to be something that everybody agrees with, and that's fine. I respect your experience just like you should respect my experience. So what happened was that there's a whole backstory of us trying to make a decision about whether or not we wanted children. So I was like 38, we were just trying to decide if we wanted kids or not. It took us like a year to decide. We then had the IVF. Obviously that failed, and then a year went by. My husband suddenly said to me out of the blue, "Do you want to try again?" And I'd actually been thinking about it, so it was just bizarre that he said that. So we went to go and see a specialist, an IVF specialist. Obviously we were in private. We had our IVF was on the NHS, so we went private for the second time where we were going to have a consultation. And basically in this consultation room, the woman basically said to me, "You're old, your eggs are dried up, you're completely infertile, it's not going to happen for you. The only way that you will ever have a child is with surrogate. Your husband's sperm goes in someone else, and they have a child." So, and the whole reason I was thinking I wanted a kid was because I wanted a piece of me, you know, a piece of me and my husband. So the idea of surrogacy, the idea of adoption, it just wasn't for me, it wasn't for us. So basically she crushed all of our hopes and dreams in that consultation and told us there was no point doing IVF, that the last time I'd had IVF, it was the absolute biggest amount of drugs they could have given me, and I only produced one egg. It's a year down the line, it'd be a complete, anyway, it was devastating. So we came out of that appointment kind of realizing we had to come to terms with the fact that this wasn't going to happen for us. It was the end of the road. A family friend had died. We'd gone to Wales actually for the funeral, and I remember just feeling a bit weird. This was like the week after. I remember just feeling a bit weird. I was really bloated. I was very gassy. I just felt a bit odd. Anyway, so I went to the funeral and I had a sip of wine and I was like, no, I can't even take it away from me. I can't have any wine, which was very unusual for me at the time actually. And I just felt really, really weird. And actually it was my husband who said to me, take a pregnancy test, take a pregnancy. And I was like, are you nuts? It's like a year after the IVF. We've literally just been told it's a physical impossibility for me to get pregnant, like it's not gonna happen. Anyway, so I took a pregnancy test and lo and behold, I was pregnant. And I've since learned that sometimes what can happen is as you flow into perimenopause, you can have a fertility spike. It's almost like your body's one last hurrah. Your body's like, we can do it, just give us one last strong egg. And I think that's what happened with me. I think I think the IVF and the stress of my mum dying, my mum had literally died in the January and we did IVF that September. So it was a bit of a strange year. So it was completely unexpected. It felt like a complete miracle. And when we did the test, I was already quite a few weeks on. So when I was in that consultant's office and she basically told me, you don't have a hope in hell, I was actually pregnant in the office, which was so bizarre. Got really, really excited, obviously. Couldn't believe it had happened. Just felt like an absolute miracle. Felt like it was 100% right. It had happened on its own. It was going to happen. Like there was no doubt in my mind that we were going to have a baby boy. Everything was fine. We got to the day before my first scan. The day before my first scan, and I started bleeding. I won't go into all of the details of how I experienced my miscarriage unless you want me to do a separate video about it, which I am happy to do. But basically I started bleeding, obviously phoned the clinic, etc. They basically said there's nothing we can do anyway, just let it see its natural course, go for your appointment the next day. Anyway, and that evening, throughout the evening, it was obvious to me and to my husband that I'd miscarried essentially. So we had the various tests done afterwards. Yes, I'd had a miscarriage. I didn't need to have any further procedures done or anything. It had all cleaned itself out, and that was it. Like once again, you're like, 1 minute I was gonna be a mum and have a baby, and the next minute just nothing. It's the most surreal and bizarre experience. The interesting thing is, and this is why I say it's such a uniquely personal experience, I was upset, of course I was, but I wasn't completely devastated, and actually I kind of moved through it and kind of on from it quite easily and quite quickly. And I kind of made my peace with it really quickly, I think is what I'm trying to say. Years later, and people spoke to me about it as if I should be devastated, as if I should be on the ground and having a funeral, like a memorial service every year. A lot of people put their thoughts and feelings on what I should be feeling, thinking and doing onto me, which was not a nice experience to have, because my experience was very unique to me. But yeah, like I say, for some reason I seem to make my peace with it quite easily and kind of process it. But it wasn't until about a year later that I had the realization why. So this is where it gets maybe a bit weird for you, but stick with me. So what I had said all along, when I said to Jason about having a child, I specifically said the words, I don't want to go my whole life not knowing what it feels like to be pregnant. I want to be pregnant. I want to get pregnant. I want to feel what it's like to be pregnant. And that's actually what I was saying all the time. Not that I'd even actually really registered that those were my words. And about a year later, I just had this sudden realization that the universe had given me exactly what I'd asked for. Because in those few precious weeks that I was pregnant, something deep inside me shifted. I felt what it was like to be pregnant. I felt what it was like to be a mother. It was my first real insight into it, and it was so powerful. And in my mind, what I realized was, or in my heart, what I realized was, that little tiny soul that came into my womb, his little feet were never meant to walk on the earth. His little feet were only ever meant to walk inside of me to give me such a precious gift that I had asked for, and then he was to go back. He was never destined to walk on the earth in this little lifetime of his. He just came here to help me with this one experience. When I realized that, it felt so huge, and it took me ages to tell Jason that that's what I felt about it, but I don't think he quite understood, but I think he kind of did. But to me, that's how I found meaning in my miscarriage. That's how I found real peace in the miscarriage. That's how I started to believe that that miscarriage was actually a gift from the universe. And for me, a lot of it is about how you perceive things, how you frame things, how you process things. You can get lots of lessons and joy and meaning from something really, really devastating if you choose to see it in that kind of way, which I think is what I had done, to process it and to make it make sense to me. That's what came to me, that it was this gift from the universe, and that I'd never asked to be a mother, I'd asked to be pregnant, and that's what I got. And then when I thought that that little soul had come down just to touch me and not to walk the earth, oh, and funnily enough, whenever I go and see a healer or anybody spiritual, they always say to me, there's a little boy holding your hand really tightly. And I know that little boy spirit, that little boy soul who came down, he walks with me. He'd been with me before, he will be with me again in past lifetimes, in lifetimes to come, and he came to give me that little gift. So that's how I found meaning in my miscarriage. I know that might be completely left field for a lot of you. If you do want any more videos on this subject, let me know. If you've had a similar experience or want to share your experience or have anything at all to say, please feel free to go into the comments. I will deeply respect everything that you have to say and your experiences. I hope this video has brought peace into some people who needed it. I think that's why I was sharing it. Sending you all so much love. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.